How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Dave S. Anderson, and we are here to transform your life through the teachings of the incredible mystic, the one, the only Neville Goddard. And in this video, I'm excited to share with you sort of the backstory of how I first discovered the work of Neville Goddard in the first place. It was actually all the way back in 2004 that I started on this path. And it started at my grandparents' house. You see, my grandparents lived about 2.5 hours away from my family home. And at all the main occasions of the year, Christmas and Thanksgiving in the summertime, my family, myself, my two sisters, my mom, my dad, we'd pick up, we'd drive 2.5 hours to my grandparents' place. These are my mom's parents. And we'd visit them. And my grandfather's name was Don Stewart. Was an incredible man, a fascinating person. And I can remember my entire life, he was always into new things, like always getting passionate about new hobbies. I remember he had a whole period of time, quite a long time, where he was a bird carver. So he picked up the hobby of bird carving. He would sit in this little corner of his kitchen, and he had a whole bird carving station. At one point, he was really into photography. At one point, he got really into cooking bread, baking bread, and like perfecting these recipes to bake the most phenomenal bread. I would always want to go to my grandparents' house, and I'd want to have grandpa's bread toasted, and then my grandmother made the most amazing raspberry jam. So I'd put my grandmother's jam on my grandfather's bread that I toasted. It was absolutely perfect and delicious every single time. But the other thing that my grandfather was really into was spirituality. And I guess you could say quantum physics, mysticism. He was just one of the most curious people that I'd ever met when it came to some of these topics. And whenever I went to my grandparents' house, one of the things I would do is I would look for any new and interesting books that were on my grandfather's bookshelf. He was always acquiring new and interesting books that for some reason I felt really drawn to, even in my younger years. Even in high school, I was sort of into this stuff. I related with my grandfather and could understand why he was fascinated by some of this subject matter. And in 2004, there was a new documentary that had just been released called What the Bleep Do We Know? What the Bleep Do We Know? Came out in 2004. Actually, one of the people that were interviewed in that movie is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who today is one of the most fascinating people, one of the most incredible teachers on quantum physics and understanding how the brain works. So if you haven't checked out the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, I cannot recommend it enough. But I'm curious, if you've seen the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? Let me know in the comments. Just drop a comment below this video and tell me you've seen the movie. This movie came out in 2004. It's now been distributed, I think, translated into 30 languages and, played millions and millions of times across the world. But the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know, was really, in 2004, the film that opened my eyes to the world of quantum physics, to the world of energy medicine. And it was my grandfather, Don Stewart, that actually turned me on to this. And at the time, one of the people that he was reading a lot of material from was Dr. Wayne Dyer. So some of the books that my grandfather had, Caroline Myss, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, some of these authors. And Wayne Dyer was one of the people that he really spoke about a lot, one of the people that he loved to read. And I remember, I think it was probably that Christmas or maybe a Christmas a couple years later, he gave me this gift, the book, The Power of Intention by Dr. Wayne Dyer. The Power of Intention by Dr. Wayne Dyer. If you've read that book, let me know. Phenomenal book. And that was how I sort of started going down the rabbit hole of these spiritual teachings of Wayne Dyer, these life teachings, these principles that I thought were just brilliant. Everything that I read from people like Wayne Dyer made so much sense to me. And I got, really excited and really interested and really curious about studying this material and then seeing how I could apply it to my life. So, my first year of college, I was doing like Wayne Dyer meditations in my dorm room, probably like every other college kid was doing, right? Like I'm in my dorm room. Some kids are having like big parties and stuff like that. I'm in my dorm room reading The Power of Intention by Wayne Dyer and doing his meditations as I fall asleep at night, just really trying to study this and apply it and see how I could really put it to practice. And, I went to school for music, for voice performance. I have a background in operatic voice performance. So, I was sort of into different things, and I was in a different kind of world, and I'm wanting to maximize my own performance in a lot of different ways. And I sort of fell in love with this whole world of spirituality, and my grandfather and I really connected over this. I think, my grandparents had 8 grandkids. I think I was the only grandchild that really talked to my grandfather about all this material. I remember him turning me on to the teachings of a guy named Gary Craig, who's the creator of EFT, which is called Emotional Freedom Technique. And my grandfather gave me a set of DVDs of every single masterclass that Gary Craig taught on this tapping technique, EFT. You may have seen this or heard about it. And I started studying this when I was 17 years old, 18 years old. Again, in my university college dorm room, I'm there like doing tapping and stuff to help with my singing and performance and some of the anxiety and the nerves I had around getting on stage, which was important to deal with if you're in school to study singing and performance. I digress a little bit, but the teachings of Wayne Dyer is really what flipped the switch for me. That's really where I was most drawn. And if you read any of the material of Wayne Dyer, if you study Wayne's material enough, he references someone by the name of Neville over and over again in his material. And for the longest time, I just didn't really think anything of it. I would read through these passages. He'd be referencing Neville. He'd never say his full name. He just said Neville. And I would sort of glaze past these passages, not think much of it, until finally, I don't remember when this was exactly, but this name kept coming up enough that I became curious. I'm like, who is this person? Who's he talking about? And sure enough, the person he was talking about was Neville Goddard. Here's his complete collection of work. This book here says The World's Greatest Mystic. And I realized that Dr. Wayne Dyer, one of the people that he studied, one of the most important people that he learned from was Neville Goddard. And so that is how I discovered the work of Neville. The very first book that I read of Neville's was The Power of Awareness. And to this day, I have 2 favorite books of Neville's. The Power of Awareness, and which he wrote. I've got all the complete works here of Neville. So I love The Power of Awareness. I think that's a really good starting point if you're wanting to dive into the work of Neville. Start with The Power of Awareness. It was written in 1952. And the other book that I think is an absolute masterpiece from Neville, published in 1961, he wrote this book. It's called The Law and the Promise. The Law and the Promise, written in 1961. An absolute gem. Especially the back half of that book feels like an instruction manual for life. It's an instruction manual, basically helping you to get anything you want. So, Power of Awareness, 1952. The Law and the Promise, 1961. If you are wanting to start down the rabbit hole for yourself in the teachings of Neville, I highly recommend that you start with those 2 books. I'd read The Power of Awareness first and read The Law and the Promise next. So drop a comment if you've read either of these books. And if you're now going to go and listen to one of those audiobooks or read it, I want you to come on back to this video after and just share your number 1 takeaway that you're pulling from those books. So that's really it for today. I just wanted to share with you, if you're tuning into my channel here, I wanted to share with you why I started getting into this in the first place. And I really owe it all to my grandfather, Don Stewart. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2019. And but really and truly, one of the most incredible people. Never stopped learning his entire life. I think he was 90 or 91 when he passed away, and never once stopped learning. His whole life just had this insatiable quest for knowledge and for wisdom. And I think he even went completely vegan, like plant-based, in his 80s. He decided that was going to be beneficial to his health, and he went, vegan. Like, who does that in their 80s after they've been eating and doing things a certain way for their entire life? So I see a lot of myself in my grandfather, Don Stewart. This is my mom's father. And in many ways, the work that I'm doing here on this channel, the coaching that I do, the consulting that I do, the way that I'm able to support people in creating transformations in their being and who they are. I owe so much of that to my grandfather, my late grandfather, Don Stewart. I owe so much of that to the late Dr. Wayne Dyer, Neville Goddard, a lot of these teachers these people that I've looked up to, that I've learned from now since dating back to early 2003, 2004. So thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can be notified on future videos. I guess you got to click that notification bell as well. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Dave Anderson, and I will see you in the next video.